Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Emily, I've been reading your book, Buy Now, How Amazon Branded Convenience and Normalized Monopoly. But before we get to the topic of the book, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your background.
Yes, well, as we were discussing just before we started recording today, I'm from Canada. I grew up in Southern Ontario. And then I moved to the United States to do my graduate work. So I got my PhD in communication at the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. And then since 2004, I've been a faculty member in the Department of Communication at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I'm now associate professor.
And what does a student in communication learn?
That's a great question. We get that question a lot actually in our department, because communication is a really broad and I think exciting field because it really encompasses both the humanities and the social sciences, and it encompasses theory and history and research, but it can also encompass hands-on production. So our department, for example, spans from interpersonal communication to media studies to TV and film production, performance, speech, and film studies. And other departments include, other subfields like organizational communication or health communication.
So I am a big fan of a club called Toastmasters International, where we learn public speaking. I wonder if public speaking is part of the communication story. And also in regards to social media, how much social media is part of the communication stories?
So in our department, for example, we have a public speaking class that a lot of our students take, and I think do find very useful because regardless of the jobs or even like community positions we go on to find ourselves in, we often do need to speak in a public setting. So that, yeah, we do offer that class. And social media, of course, is becoming a growing part of our field. It was seen maybe even not so many years ago as kind of just this new, maybe flashy, trendy thing. But now, of course, we all recognize how integrated it is into our everyday lives and how it's really transformed, all kinds of communication, from corporate communication to interpersonal communication. And in fact, within our field, departments and journals used to be called like mass communication, and now that's really shifted to just be communication or media, recognizing that we have all different kinds of media now.
I wonder if you get young students who want to be YouTube or Instagram influencers. Since, to be honest, I think that requires a lot of skills. I see it as so effortless when I'm on this side of the screen, but also I know that it requires a lot of preparation and setup, and I don't know, just and how to share that you did this posting that took I don't know 30 seconds to view, but maybe a whole day to prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something a lot of our students are interested in, but to be honest, it's something some of them are already doing.
Okay.
So I'll often find, say, in a class, whether it's a small or a large class, that some people are already content creators, and some of them are already making money from it.
Wow.
So so sometimes they're really teaching us or the rest of the class about what they've, learned in this sort of profession that they've already started to develop. But I think what you point out is correct, that a lot of what looks easy or effortless, among content creators actually takes kind of a grind to produce.
Mhm.
And part of the art of it is making it seem effortless and like you just did this, in no time at all, when in fact it's very thought out and artful.
Wow, perfect. Okay, so what got you to write this book about Amazon?
Mm. Well, I think it really does come out of both my professional interests and my personal experience. So I've been interested in questions of advertising and consumer culture and what it means to be a consumer in, contemporary society for a long time. But also, I myself over time had become a more frequent and embedded user of Amazon. And it was about 6 years ago now that there was kind of an expose type article in the New York Times about the Amazon's working conditions. And the article focused mainly on the working conditions at sort of Amazon headquarters in Seattle. So this was among actually its tech workers, its white collar workers, but it also then reported on some of the um, things that had come to light about working conditions in the fulfillment centers. And it just kind of, connected me to, made me realize like, wow, how much money am I spending per year now on Amazon for so many different things when, maybe 15 years earlier, I'd only bought an occasional book on it. And, how little thought have I actually given to what it takes to get, say, products in 2 business days, or to have this like tremendous selection available to me. So it really brought home to me this idea of what I call in the book distribution fetishism. So we get this idea from, Karl Marx of commodity fetishism, where you just focus on the qualities and the relationship and this sort of, the price that you pay for the object that you get, and you don't think about how the price of it ultimately is connected to, the people who made it. And I think this is true also now for, for these vast networks of distribution that we're embedded in, that for maybe until recently in the pandemic, we didn't really give a lot of thought to what does it take to get us all these things from all over the world in like stunningly short periods of time. So, we had kind of fetishized this magic of e-commerce and not connected our consumer experience to these like physical infrastructures and like shifts in employment and labor that make it happen.
Okay. So on the personal level, at what moment did you realize that you were an Amazon consumer? That, Amazon is an integral part of your life and it's very difficult to do without.
Yeah, I mean, I think around that time, and as I started doing this work, you can do things like look back at your purchase history on Amazon and see like how it's become more and more frequent over time. And I reflected too on like the moment that I decided to become a Prime member, or when I first, when we had our first child, how that actually became a moment. I think we became much more dependent in a way on Amazon. Like there was something called the Amazon Mom or Amazon.mom program at the time where, and this is kind of classic, monetization of personal data. If you, told Amazon when your baby was going to be born, you could get, some significant discounts on baby gear and diapers and things of that nature. So and this is very common to sort of the techniques of platform enclosure that Amazon does. It basically has all these programs, incentives, and proliferating products and services that kind of persuade us to spend more and more of our time and consumer activities within their various platforms. And I, on reflection, realized that was definitely true for me, and that it had kind of crept up on me over time. You know what I mean? It was like sort of step by step, increment by increment. And I had gone from maybe buying a book or 2 across the year, with the company, to, interacting with it, maybe buying something from it on a weekly basis. And I don't think I'm alone, like in that transition. I think obviously that's how it's become one of the most highly market capitalized countries in the world.
Well, I'm gonna share with you my story of when is it that I became an Amazon convert. So I have always resisted the Amazon pull. I have always resisted the magic and the convenience of getting everything with one click. But there was one time that I ran out of ink for my printer, and I went to my local office supplies. It wasn't there. I went downtown. It wasn't there. I spent half a day looking for a freaking, I don't know, $20 ink cartridge. And at the end of the day, I couldn't find it. And then I said, screw this. And I just went to the Amazon website. I clicked buy now. And it took 2 days and it was here. And, the price was competitive. But I feel like those hours, that half a day that I spent going from one place to the other in winter, I would never get back. So, like I always try to encourage the local economy, but there are some items like ink for my printer that I know I'm just gonna go directly to my Amazon page and order because it's just too much of a hassle. And here I live in Montreal, in a place where if I go to a store and ask for anything in English, although everyone speak English, I don't know, I'm treating like garbage because they rather that I was speaking French. So I say, well, Amazon takes my money whether in English or French, either way. So I also I'm resentful some of the local shops here. I mean, I'm sure they try to protect the French culture and whatever, but I rather buy something and say thank you instead of merci, and without being vilified for saying thank you in English. Anyway, so that's the turning point in which I said, okay, for some things I'm just not going to even think about it. If I need ink for my printer, I'm just going to go directly to Amazon.
Mhm. Well, I think too that there's been changes in bricks and mortar retail that have gone hand in hand with the rise of e-commerce, which of course has been spearheaded by Amazon, but there's other retailers as well. And so as consumer habits shift, and people tend to buy certain things online, they are actually then going to be less available in your local stores.
Yeah.
And I think you have that specific story, and others may recognize that there's some things it's just not really worth looking for, or you might not get the selection that you're hoping for in the local stores anymore. So I think there's been these shifts in, and of course we've seen, many big box retailers and, some Main Street types of retailers really struggle as dollars have shifted to e-commerce. So there's been that overall shift, but at the same time, I think there's been this ratcheting up of expectations of like how inexpensive things will be, how much selection we're going to be able to get or choose from. And I think Amazon very much encourages this idea and promotes this idea of like, you should be able to get whatever you want, whenever you want it, and has ratcheted up the expectation of how convenient and how quick and how easy everything will be. And not to mention the way that like you can even shop now on your mobile phone, like that shopping should almost take no time out of your day, when in fact it used to be much more part of the routines of everyday life. And as a parent, I mean, I can that I think being a parent is one of the things that has pushed me personally towards shopping more online, because actually it's really hard to get to the store with little kids. So and other people have other constraints too that have made e-commerce valuable to them. And my book is not saying that e-commerce is bad. Actually, I think that's going to be part of our landscape. But it's my book raises the question more about the question of market dominance. Like, should there really be one company that controls, now the estimates are between like 41 and more than half of e-commerce in the United States. That's a lot of power, that one company has to then really start to set terms, for both consumers and the many, many small businesses that sell their products on Amazon.
Okay, so you are obviously a conscious consumer. You evaluate whether you're going to get this from your local store or from Amazon, or you're going to, and you think about the impact of your purchase in society in general, which is a lot. I wonder how many consumers are conscious consumers. They give a second thought of, okay, am I going to get this from Amazon, or am I going to try to encourage the local retailer in my neighborhood? I mean, of course, Amazon would like us to buy everything from our phone, but how much of the populations are conscious of their purchases?
Yeah, I think it's good to be a conscious consumer. I think some of us have more bandwidth and maybe privilege to do that than others, you
Mm.
know. Not everyone really has the luxury maybe to, you know, be like second guessing and like thinking through all the purchases they make. So yeah, I mean, my book actually, I would never discourage someone from being a conscious consumer and like really thinking through those implications on an individual level. You know, I think it's really good to raise awareness and like to you know, try to make the best choices you can, because all the money that we spend kind of helps reproduce or create the, you know, the economy, which is like a significant portion of the world around us. So being being connected to those implications, I think, is great. Um, but I also try to be realistic about, you know, the how much individual consumer choices are going to make a difference here. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that there are tremendous knowledge asymmetries here. You
Mm.
know, like I can imagine and like think about what the implications are of my choices, or wonder the ways in which Amazon might be nudging my purchases or the selections it's showing me. But I'm kind of never really going to know. You know, I'm not going to know like, you know, if someone else, you know, did the product search on Amazon, would they get slightly different results, or has Amazon's algorithm, you know, pushed results up that benefit, you know, itself versus other sellers? Has, you know, has it done a good job in making sure that the product reviews are accurate, or, you know, are these star reviews perhaps misleading? Um, you know, is it giving me like certain discounts, you know, to nudge me in certain ways? I mean, it's really hard to actually, and or to even really fully know, like, you know, Amazon will tell you how quickly the product is coming, but not like where it's coming from
Mm.
necessarily, or like all the people who touched it, or what are the productivity, you know, you know, regulations that are making them work faster. So I think that it's really hard for us to actually have all that information to inform our purchases. So I'm more in favor of thinking about how consumers could maybe become more organized
Mm.
and, you know, work together to, you know, ask that a company that has as much power as Amazon, you know, be more transparent about some of those things that we can't quite know, like how they're using our data, or how, you know, their product search algorithm works, or, you know, what the working conditions are like in their fulfillment centers, and how our shopping choices impact, say, you know, delivery routes or those workers. Um, and so, you know, again, like, yes, we can, as individual conscious consumers, we can divert our purchases, and that can make a small impact. But Amazon is a huge company. It has like many different areas of business. And I think as it becomes more and more almost like a utility, like it's controls so much of e-commerce that if you want to buy or sell online, you almost have to use it, then maybe what's required is a more societal level, you know, demand of accountability from Amazon, that it you know, do more fair dealing, and that it be more transparent, and that, you know, that there be some more oversight actually to make sure that if it's not just going to be in the market, that actually be the market, that
Mm.
that market be like a fair and even playing field.
Right. Okay. And how much of this do you think is okay, well, my train of thought is that these are market cycles that at a given moment, one company is dominant over everything else. And it comes to mind a company like Sears, who was a dominant company because they had this uh, revolutionary technology called the mail-in catalog, and you could get your catalog in your mail, and it was like the craziest technology of the time. And Sears became dominant. They had Sears mortgages, Sears repairs shops, Sears everything, and almost the same critiques that we are hearing about Amazon today are the same critiques that at that time we were hearing about Sears. And then came Amazon, and I mean, no, Walmart. And the revolutionary thing about Walmart is that they had somehow better logistics to distribute and to negotiate prices within, and Walmart became like the evil corporate overlord that dominated all our purchases, and now it's Amazon, and we are putting all this attention in Amazon right now, but by the time maybe regulators do something, it will be some other company that we couldn't even imagine that came out of nowhere. So I don't know if this is a cycle of capitalism, or are they going to be dominant for the next 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you bring up those comparisons with Sears and Walmart, because I think that that's very apt. And actually, I do compare that and think about how all three of these companies are distribution brands,
Mm.
and then all of them in a way have aim to be kind of everything stores, like that you could just do anything there. But in a way, I do see Amazon having um, some distinct qualities compared to Sears and Walmart, in particular around being, you know, um, a digital company. I mean, obviously, Walmart uses computing and a lot of digital technologies, but um, as a platform company, Amazon has like distinct advantages, I think, where every as a platform, it connects typically two parties, like buyers and sellers, or you know um, advertisers and their advertising target, which is us. And every time a transaction of any kind is done on Amazon, they collect data about it. And then the data itself is tremendously, tremendously valuable. And they can, sell products and services on the basis of that data. They have increasingly unique market intelligence that they don't have to share with anybody, that they can use to, develop new emerging products and services. So, according to the most recent like industry, estimates of this, 3/4 of product searches in the United States start on Amazon, right? Like that is that's, so now Amazon has even better data about product search than even Google has, which we think of as being as like the standard, search engine, not to mention all the purchase data that they have. And there's 147 million Prime households in the United States. So I think, you know, also, being a digital platform type company, you can, once you've built a certain infrastructure, you can just sort of add users without necessarily having to add, increase your capital outlay a lot, especially for its like purely digital types of services, say like Alexa or streaming. And increasingly now we see Amazon moving into, a variety of businesses where they kind of they're kind of controlling more and more of the whole supply chain, right? So now, with Amazon Web Services, they're in the cloud computing business. And so that's sort of the very infrastructure of the internet. They're also getting more into the logistics and delivery end of things. So, I think both Sears and Walmart got really big, and primarily in the main thing that they were doing, which was retail. But Amazon has gotten, really big, I think even faster. And it's got all these, connected businesses where it's controlling, a huge amount of the supply chain. And then it has all these this ability to subsidize different parts, right? Like it's so that they can lose money for a long time in a certain area while they're making, say, huge profits in Amazon Web Services.
Right,
They can
right.
grow and so I think, I'm not going to predict the future. Like, sure, like there's something around the corner, that is a technology that Amazon didn't anticipate and that will somehow encroach. But there's just sort of structural advantages that Amazon has that are not actually quite comparable to the Sears and the Walmarts of the world, that make it a little bit hard to, see what might slow it down anytime soon.
Right. I do have one. I mean, for the most part, I am a consumer of Amazon. I mean, I try to limit myself, but like for things like ink for my printer, I know that I'm going to purchase from Amazon. But I am a critique on some of the anti-competitive practice that they have, that they steal data from some of their sellers in their website and then replicate the products and service and they didn't take any risk because it was the creators of that product who did the research and development, the market uh, studies, and tested the waters. And then here comes Amazon, takes all that information and creates a similar product at a lower price. So I do have a major critique against those practices, and I think they're being sued in Europe for those anti-competitive practices. I'm not sure who the development of those cases, but that is one of the major critique that I have against the company. I wonder if you could point out another unfair practice that they have that is like a sore eye for them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, you raise a good example there, in that they're currently under investigation for that in the United States as well. And there's a bill under consideration in Congress that's precisely aimed at this idea that if you provide a platform, that you then should not engage in unfair competition with people who use your platform. I think another thing to consider is that as Amazon has become, controlled so much of e-commerce, and it almost is like almost necessary to be on Amazon because, as I mentioned about, so much product search is there, and so many people just kind of automatically are buying on Amazon, that Amazon has been ratcheting up the cost of the service for sellers to be on Amazon. So, essentially, in order to be findable, on the site, it becomes more and more required to buy certain kinds of marketing services, from Amazon, like to be a sponsored ad, or to, be part of what's called fulfillment by Amazon, where you agree that you'll send your product to their warehouses and then they'll fulfill it for you. And that's, that's an expense on every single item. And so that's almost become, a requirement. And then, as they become increasingly the only game in town, they're increasing those the cost of those services all the time. So they're really eating into the margins of these sellers. And so it's kind of ironic because, like, Amazon is an e-commerce, really exploded e-commerce, especially with Prime, and that created a great opportunity for all these small businesses and sellers. But now it's like it becomes really hard for them to make any money and really thrive on the platform. And so there's I think, and that's something that consumers are really disconnected from. Like the average consumer, we're really not hearing that much about the struggles that third-party sellers have on the platform. And also we never really get to interact with them directly. Like on some e-commerce platforms, they facilitate this direct communication between seller and buyer, but Amazon doesn't want that. It wants our primary relationship to be with Amazon. Right. And then the seller, if it needs to tell us something, it has to kind of go through Amazon. If we need to tell them something, it goes through Amazon. So Amazon's not really facilitating those buyer-seller relationships.
Right. Okay. And I wonder, I mean, I know we're coming close to, in fact, we are reaching our time limit, but obviously, Amazon is in a position where many business leaders or companies would like to be in. They like to be dominant of an industry, and they like to be the first stop in the consumer's mind. And there have been other conglomerate, to my mind, come General Electric under the leadership of Jack Welch, who wanted to be everything in the industrial sector. And he did fail after a couple of years of being king of the hill. He did fail. And I wonder right now, Amazon is king of the hill, you may say, and how much of that is in business lingo, good leadership, and eventually, like happened with General Electric, they will fail because it's just that's the way it goes in business. I mean, not industry stays as a leader for forever. Eventually, a competitor comes to the playground and do something better, or they start lacking off, or maybe they have a consumer dissatisfaction and a revolt from people reading your book and many other ones. I mean, for the now, many of the authors that I interview, they ask their listeners and their readers to buy their books in other venues other than Amazon. So there is already some kind of revolt of this dominance, and maybe it will expand, or maybe some other player will will come to the game and do a better service and have a better balance between efficiency of the market and have a clear give a clear conscience to the buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question people are asking, especially since Jeff Bezos stepped down as CEO last year. I mean, he's executive chairman still, but so I think he still has a hand in it, but obviously he's moving into other interests. And when you read sort of like the trade books, about the success of Amazon, a lot of it is often connected to kind of Bezos's single-mindedness, his kind of uncanny ability to read the market and how new technology was going to shift opportunities, and the way he really pushed his employees and various teams to like constantly be innovating. And some of those innovations like honestly didn't work out, and were failures, and we don't really talk about them anymore, but some of them really took off, like the Kindle and Alexa and the Echo smart speaker, and even just the idea of like one-click buying. I mean, these are just all things that kind of are like the secret sauce of Amazon, and no doubt there's this like sense of urgency at Amazon, like to keep coming up with these new ideas. So yeah, maybe they'll, the leadership won't be successful, or they'll get complacent, or someone else will have a better idea. But I do think that there's something more systemic that's even like beyond just Amazon, because it's just think about the tremendously fast rise to market dominance of, say, the big five, right? Like GAFAM, like Google, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft. That is a broader systemic thing that I think can ebb and flow a little bit depending on, say, this question of leadership, or like just stumbling on a good idea. But there's something systemic about the digital economy, I think, and the some of the economics of platforms that I talked about earlier, that has really led to sort of first mover advantages, network effects, and I think for a long time a kind of fundamental not understanding on the part of governments and regulators that they're dealing with something like qualitatively different that might require a different kind of regulatory framework than what we had previously. Because ultimately, like, to my mind, it doesn't make any difference if Amazon fails, but something else comes and just directly replaces it and is just as dominant. Like, the good thing about the internet was it's supposed to be that it was like this place for innovation, and like for new ideas to bubble up quickly, and for there to be like tons of competition, right? Like these are things that we think are good about capitalism. And I think what we're seeing now with, these tech giants are forces that potentially are suppressing what we think might be the good things about the digital economy. So whether it's Amazon or someone else, it's those fundamentals, like the structures of it, that I think are might not change unless we do
Wow.
something about it.
Yeah, you're completely right. I will admit to one product in which I am an Amazon hostage and I have no other solution or alternative, which is Audible. I love listening to books to my phone, and I love how I can get all these voice actors and actresses with different accents and sound effects that it give a higher value to the book I have in my hand, because I get transported to this other sound effect world and all these voices. I mean, I am a hostage in that, I admit it, and I don't know of an alternative.
Well, I think Audible is a really great example, actually, of how we might think differently about regulation, because Audible was an Amazon acquisition, right? So Audible is someone else's idea. Like, they grew
Right.
that business and it became the, market leader in audiobooks. Audiobooks, I think, are the fastest growing format right now within, book publishing. And so Amazon acquired it, a while ago now. And so, that just helped solidify, I mean, they're more or less market dominant in different kind of business areas. And in book publishing, they're so dominant, right? Because they've been in it for so long. And, but maybe, regulators might have thought, well, like, should Amazon be buying the market leader in audiobooks? Or would we end up with a more competitive environment for audiobooks if it isn't gobbled up by this huge, online book selling, online book publishing giant. And that's something that also regulators are looking at more carefully now and thinking about this question of acquisitions in a broader way, right? Like to think about what becomes the strategic advantage of that acquisition, and now that we understand the logic of platforms a little bit better.
I just one last question. I'm sorry I'm keeping you longer than I promised, but in regards to the interference of regulators and making sure there is a fair playground for everyone. So we have that in the United States and Canada, regulators trying at least to figure out what's fair and what's not unfair. But at the same time, these internet companies are competing against companies in China, for example, who the regulators don't care that much. In fact, some of those regulators, they're ones to make sure their companies are uh, predominant internationally. So my my thinking is, okay, so we are regulators in the United States are making sure there's a competitive environment in here in North America, and that no company is too big to dominate the whole marketplace. While in China, and yeah, China comes to mind, is the most obvious example. They are trying to have not only market dominance but global dominance. And how would the United States compete against that?
Yeah, I mean, I think now, like the, the top 5 or 6, market capitalized companies in the world are, I think it's still at this, speaking, American tech companies. So, ultimately, when it comes to questions of sovereignty, we have to deal with the borders that we have.
Yeah.
And when these international players come and want to play within our borders, then they can be subject to our rules in those settings. So yeah, it's a thorny question, but do we want to then be held to the standards of some other country that we're not a part of? So yeah, I mean, I think it's yeah, do we want to use this question of like global dominance to, do we want to have that overwhelm the values that we hold about, competition, and the ways in which, if we're going to have capitalism, maybe let's try and make it serve us, and as opposed to kind of rule us. I guess that would be my
Wow.
thought.
Okay, Emily, my last question is, can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow the work that you do?
Thanks. Yeah. My book is Buy Now: How Amazon Branded Convenience and Normalized Monopoly, published by the MIT Press. You can find it at an array, of course, of online booksellers, beyond just Amazon, certainly. And you could follow me on Twitter at West Emily E. And yeah, I'd look forward to engaging with lots of folks about this topic.
And all those links will be in the show notes. Emily, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.